Okay.
We're recording.
I was like,
right now.
okay.
So-
What's wrong with this? It's a third, sorry.
Love.
It's a Thursday.
That's how I have to go, so my feet look like crap, so.
Okay, welcome to our work meeting tonight. It will be a quick night, which will be good. So we will jump right in to item 1.1, review of this evening's agenda. Any comments on the agenda tonight? So,
Sure.
the two items. Okay, future agenda items. Teddy, any future agenda items?
Not to my knowledge right now.
Sherry, anything?
No, that I want on the agenda here.
Michael, I did want to see about, we talked about planning commissioners, and I now know
Oh,
our
yes.
chair is resigning.
Yes.
So if we wanna, I thought we'd maybe bring that back again and
Yep.
get some interviews done.
From what I know, we've got a couple reserves or staff that were okay for a minute, but
Yeah, and obviously, well, it would be my recommendation that we have an alternate move into a regular position. And I've asked Daryl Finn if he would be willing, if it were the council's pleasure to.
Is he our only alternate right now?
He's an alternate.
He's the only one right
No,
now?
the other one is
Forrest.
Forrest, yeah.
But Daryl's been there longer?
They were
They're both
appointed
same
at the
time.
same time,
That's right.
yeah.
Okay.
and then who's perceived chair? Is it the current vice chair or is it? or-
So, the current, Chris is still serving, he's gonna serve through the rest of the year, and then yes, we'd have to,
They nominate, it's just
Yeah.
not necessarily,
Can I ask a question about Daryl and Forrest? Would both of them be willing to, I guess, who has their attendance been different, what would qualify one over the other?
and we could bring that to you.
I think that would be
Yeah.
important, just to understand who's been attending, who's been serving,
Certainly.
and more active role, that kind of a thing, and make that decision. And make sure both of them would be willing to move into that role.
then you anticipate two new alternates then, so we have three alternates again. Which I love that they've been able to sit on and comment.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. You want that on our next
If you want to,
work
yeah.
session?
Cause it's
We've already set
November,
November 9th,
1 December.
or December.
Yeah.
It'd be December 14th.
Either one, yeah.
Cause that's before,
Chris,
Yeah.
that would
yeah,
give.
that would be,
Okay.
right?
And then again, if you want to do some interviews for the new ones, if we want to do new applications, we didn't do a new round of applications this year.
No.
I'd like to see some new blood, maybe, new application, not that we did some, cause there were quite a few people that,
We've just held them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
It wouldn't hurt to re-advertise it.
Glad
Yeah,
to
you
Right.
got a couple more thousand people in the city too.
we had some good applicants, I know that,
get that done.
yeah, let me know when we can interview, I can help.
Okay.
Whatever there. Somebody, there's something else. What are my notes? Sorry, it was right there. Oh, Michael, I talked to Heather today at lunch about the free little libraries coming back. Does that need to come back to us at this point?
We need to check the proposed ordinance with our property maintenance team or management team, as well as engineering. But yes, that will come to the council as a code amendment.
Okay, cause Heather has, this is pretty cool, Heather went to her company, this is Heather Garcia on the planning commission.
Yes.
Her company is wanting to donate 10 of these free little libraries for
Oh,
our
cool.
community.
Yeah.
Just spread out through the
But
community.
then we would have ownership of those as a city or what's that?
No, it's kinda like akin to a mailbox.
Okay,
Yeah. So,
but
We just
right
wanna
now
make
they're not
sure-
approved as a,
we just wanna make sure that as they go in, that they're not going to conflict with like site triangles, utilities, you know, what are the standards? Where can they go, where can they not go? So,
Okay. So yeah, so if we can get a couple of those just moving, now that we're past a lot of our
everything.
big heavy things this summer. Okay, anything else from staff, future agenda items?
Do we have, are we looking at Osmond's stuff, Game Point stuff soon or come in? Should be the next
The next meeting.
meeting, okay.
Okay. Okay, 1.3, council discussion of future citizen recognitions.
Is that one that was emailed?
That one, yeah, they'll be here next.
DLA or DECA, yeah.
Which one is it?
DECA,
Anyways, that one, FBLA.
yeah. That's it.
In FBLA. So that'll be, they're bringing a group, they wanted to bring, they talked about spreading it over a couple of different, but they want to recognize about 30 kids.
Fill it up.
They're just gonna do they're still just gonna do a couple minute speech, just all, cause they're gonna just recognize all of them. And then we'll just do a big picture. And then just be really cool.
We have lots of chairs.
Yep.
Dylan.
Okay, move on to item 2, enterprise resource planning software discussion. Kyle, you driving this?
I'm driving this one. So thank you, glad to be here tonight. So tonight I want to lead a discussion on our enterprise resource planning software. We actually do have one right now, want to go through what that is. Some limitations we have of our current software, what could possibly be alleviated with new software, what a conversion would look like, and then a time frame, and then of course a really rough estimated cost, and then I'd be looking for feedback tonight. If the council wants more information, and that type of thing, but we can get to that at the end. So the first one is, what is an ERP? And unfortunately, I didn't realize I put that on the first slide. So ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. What essentially that is, it's software that helps take multiple business processes and helps information and data flow between these different processes. We've been using a product called Polaris Method. You've probably heard staff talk about Polaris. We've been using that since 2012. I've listed out all the modules we use that for. The big ones to notice is General Ledger, so that's what we do to keep track of all the city's finances. Utility billing, that's where we're generating utility bills for the city. Payroll is a very important one for our employees, and of course we do other things like business licensing, our main cash receipting through that. This software was actually designed for smaller communities. Harriman is the largest city that uses Polaris. I listed a few down here that I know use Polaris, including Santa Quin, Vineyard, Vernal. Many of you know that Ivan City also uses Polaris. As an aside, Alan told me before Harriman went on Polaris, Ivans was actually the largest city using Polaris at the time.
So it just makes all these talk to each other, right?
Yes, yep. So one thing is, a different ERP system might be better matched to the city's size and may offer additional functionality. So with the growth of the city in 2012, Polaris was a great product for the city. The city was smaller, of course it was growing fast. But we are now, as we approach, 55, 60,000 residents, we're starting to see some of the limitations of the software. And as we go through this, I'll go through some of the pain points we've been seeing in Polaris.
So it's not that it may offer, it does offer additional functionality.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
This isn't what Eagle Mountain's using, is it?
No. So,
I know there's other issues.
no, there's other issues there. It actually is not a software issue with Eagle Mountain, it's a business process issue. I've seen multiple, much more expensive software, cities still have the same issue if employees aren't trained on what good fraud practices are. So this next slide is, what could an ERP system include if we were to look at a new system? So anything in red are modules that we don't currently have. So in the financials, which of course finance uses a lot, you'll see contracts is one in red. This one is of particular interest to me because, as you know, the city has many contracts. We've entered into a lot of reimbursement agreements, MDAs. We don't necessarily have a great centralized place to track them. Engineering's doing some tracking, finance is doing some tracking. Then you've got somebody trying to reconcile the two systems and making sure that they match up. Contracts would be one place we'd have a centralized place. We could also put those amounts into budgets and other financial data that we currently don't have an integrated way of doing.
Would that include, like, say, our other vendors for events like fireworks or other contracts agreements that go in there as well?
Right, we can put any contract in there. What we've been doing is we've been creating purchase orders for those contracts. The problem comes if you have a multi-year contract, there isn't a good way in the system to break that up into future years. So for example, we enter into a reimbursement agreement, we know we're not gonna pay all 100,000 up front. It's gonna be spread over 4 years. I have to put the whole 100,000 in the system and make a note somewhere that I need to remember that we're not paying the whole 100,000 out in the budget.
Smart.
A couple of things is project accounting. As you know, one of our main desires as staff is long-range planning, capital asset planning. Project accounting would offer a centralized place for both finance, engineering, and administration to look at these projects that are being proposed or see progress on existing projects. Whereas now there's multiple tracking systems going on within the city. Vendor self-service is another one that I've particularly liked at other cities I've worked at. So this is a place where vendors can actually go on to essentially a website that's connected to the ERP system. They can submit invoices through that, they can sign up for ACH, which brings back the Eagle Mountain issue. I never want city employees changing routing and bank account information until they have positive confirmation they're supposed to do this. This would allow the vendor to do it themselves, and it takes out the city employee aspect of that. They can also see if invoices have been paid, and they can even submit invoices to the city through a vendor portal. And that's all tied in with the ERP, so they don't get lost. Budget is this is one of the pain points I'm gonna talk about later. The budgeting in Polaris works, however, it's very simplistic. So it doesn't really offer a good way for us to do forecasting. We're doing it all off on an Excel spreadsheet. There's not a way for departments when they're proposing budgets to actually enter it online and have it automatically fed into the system. And there's also not, this is down one, there isn't a way in our current system to do payroll projections, so payroll projections are done on a spreadsheet. I'm actually working through them right now to verify them against our budget. But essentially I've got a tab for each department and I'm having to pull in all the employee benefit information, so something that I've spent a day on can be done in a couple hours if it's integrated in with the payroll HR.
And obviously it would eliminate user errors, using more people
Right, that's-
re-entering things, the more likelihood that you have an
That's-
error.
That's one of the challenges, especially with a city or any government, they're so benefit rich. You know, for example, our 401k match since in lieu of Social Security, you can deposit that in a 457, you can deposit it in a 451. If I don't have the right formula in the right place, it either won't pull in or it'll pull in both places. So that's a good example of user error that can happen when these spreadsheets are 20 columns long. HR payroll is another place where we can definitely use improvements. So Polaris really was never designed to be an HRIS system. So when HR needs to request a new employee, and they've done what they can with technology, but they'll send out a DocuSign document to get the necessary approvals. But then they're having to manually track that outside of the system. When an employee is hired, they're having to manually key in all that information into the system. Where if there's one system from start to finish handling all of that, it eliminates that data redundancy and having to rekey things, and it's more accurate. So I stole this from a presentation I went to, but ERP projects are large and complex. I'm sure you've heard horror stories in the news about failed projects or projects taking longer than they were supposed to or costing more. So each of these little boxes is essentially its own implementation. To give you an example, so I'm of course most familiar with finance. Our fixed assets really is its own implementation. Implementing a contracts module is its own implementation. Cashiering is its own implementation. So this just gives you an idea of the amount of work that's actually involved when you implement a new system. Because essentially you're given software, and I like to think of it like a toolbox. You have all these different tools you can use to configure the system. but you actually have to configure it. And of course, the software vendor will offer people to help you with that. But it's a matter of deciding which things to turn on, which to turn off, then going through and testing it before you go live, So deficiencies in our current system. So this picture is actually out of our accountant two's office. So this is where a lot of our accounts payable and payroll files are being stored. There is an additional file cabinet in my office that has the same data, and I'm sure if I ask Jackie, I'm sure we've got financial records other places in the city. So that's one thing is just the amount of paper. We'll get to that one, but there is a general lack of automated workflow and approvals. To give you some example, accounts payable. Right now, when an invoice comes in, that invoice circulates around to the necessary approvers. They manually sign it with ink, send it back to accounts payable. Accounts payable enters it, pays it, which is generating a lot of what is in these filing cabinets. As I said, there's numerous paper-based processes where instead of an electronic signature or an electronic approval, it's going through an actual hard signature. One thing I've heard, and one of the benefits of being new is you hear a lot of people have a new person to complain to, so I've heard a lot of the complaints. Polaris is very easy to use. It was very nice for me. I was able to sit down my first day. I could figure out how to do 80% of what I needed to do in Polaris. However, to a non-accountant, it does have the feel of accounting software. And for somebody who's not used to that, it's not as intuitive and there's a learning curve with it. And as I had mentioned before, one of my big things is there isn't really a place to track capital projects, what we call project accounting. So tracking those reimbursement agreements, MDAs, and capital projects. Finally, because Polaris is a smaller software, it does have smaller features as compared with some other software that is on the market. Another thing is it doesn't really have an integrated document management system. The city's really done a great job doing what they can with Polaris. So to give you an example, in accounts payable, we do scan all of our invoices. We're able to attach a link within Polaris so we can actually pull the invoice up that way. However, if something happens, let's say an IT has to move our server and the drive name changes or our folder name changes, those links break. So it's not like a normal document management system that would be more permanent, I guess is the right word. We're definitely in compliance with all record management. We could find the invoices if we had to, but if that file name changes, we wouldn't have the one click. Although our IT department's so smart, they could probably find some way of updating Polaris for me. Shifting gears a little bit, I did want to talk about what the ERP landscape looks like from the vendors, what they're offering, and where the market's moving, just to give you an idea. So one of the big movements is software vendors are no longer offering just having you buy software, you installing it on your own servers, and you maintaining that software. They're moving to what's called software as a service. You've probably heard that term before. If the acronym for that is SaaS. And what that means is the vendor's actually the one that hosts the software. They host the storage of the data on that server. There's a few reasons for that. One is they've discovered that a government's core competency, what they do best and what they're in the business of doing, is not server administration. Although I do want to say our IT department does that and they do it well, but that isn't like a city's primary focus. It's one reason why it's moving that way, and I think a lot of government agencies in particular just don't want the hassle of managing that. To give you an example, the couple cities I've worked at, the software actually ran over 3 servers, so the IT department had 3 servers that they had to maintain, which was a challenge for a small IT department. With that being said, because they are doing that hosting, that is increasing the cost of the yearly software maintenance fee, because they are taking on that risk and that burden of hosting the software and keeping the data for us.
Does it decrease some cost on the other end?
Right, so there would be less costs on the IT side because they're not having to maintain those servers. The city's not having to buy servers, they're not having to maintain servers. electricity costs, so you're correct, that there are offsetting costs for that. And also, to be honest with you, most of these companies, they do so many of these hostings, they're more efficient at doing it and they can do it at a lower cost. Another thing is the use of customizations has diminished, so I'll date myself 20 years ago when actually it was 22, so I started my career during Y2K. And so I immediately started a job and had to do a system conversion for Y2K. And I remember we went to the software vendor, gave them a list of like 20 things that we needed to have customized to meet the business processes of that city. The software vendors don't do that anymore. They say, this is the way the software works. Yeah, like it or leave it. Sometimes they will offer to do what you want, say you want like an extra module or some special process done. They will do that for you. They will charge you for it and it's not going to be cheap, but then they build it into the software and roll it out to everybody. So you're essentially paying for an upgrade for it. With that being said, I do want to say most of the software vendors, if it's something that's mandated by the state, like for example, this is a very bad example, but when state transparency occurred and we had to start uploading files to the state, a lot of software vendors would go ahead and make that change for free because it was mandated and they built in the software. That wasn't the case for the software Harriman City used to use, and another, as a competitor of Polaris, they charged up the lake for it, but.
One of the other challenges sometimes with this is you'll have them fix something, and then if it breaks, they're like, well, that's a process, that's not ours, that's customization, you have to figure that out. So,
Yeah. Seems like it's just best to find something that's designed that works.
And we'll get to what the steps would be if we were to go this route, and I think it does address how to get around this customization issue. There's also a reduced focus on technical support. I never really got a good reason for why this is happening or why the vendors are justifying it. I can tell you right now, and I've never worked with a software company that you can do this, but if you have an issue with Polaris, I can call the phone, their office is in Orem. 99.9% of the time, I talk to a live person, they'll hop on the computer, they can get it resolved, no problem. Most companies, you submit a support ticket, you wait 3 to 5 days, somebody will call you, they'll say, oh, we need to research that. You'll wait another week, and then you end up calling them or putting in another ticket saying, hey, can you give me an update?
They probably can't find anybody to work either.
Well, that's
Every time I
That's
tell
true.
them.
So that, to Polaris's credit, that is one thing they do very well, is you talk to a live person.
it has changed a little bit with the SaaS system, if you're, cause you used to have a lot of links broken up when you were hosting yourself, and then now it's on there, and they're probably doing some of those fixes, but when it doesn't link up, or you're not working, then it can be frustrating with some of these bigger vendors.
So next step is what is actually involved if we were to move to a different ERP system. So step number one is surprisingly business process improvement. So this is where you look at your existing business processes, look at what is bad about them, and try to correct them and make them more efficient. So to give you an example, if I was to look at accounts payable, I would actually go sit down with every department in the city, say, how do you handle accounts payable? I would flow chart that out, talk with them about what a good process would be, see if, try to integrate into one process with each department. And I would be doing that for essentially every business process in the city.
So, I asked several years ago if we could do like an internal audit for processes to see if there is, not because I think staff doesn't do a great job or anything like that, but it's sometimes if you have other people kind of take a look at the processes, they might go, oh, do you know if you could do this, if it makes this faster, so I love that you would have to do that, because I think it just makes people just get a different set of eyes on there, some different opinions, and go, oh yeah, that made my life a lot easier, thanks.
One of the processes have to relate to what you're using for software. We do have a review of our internal processes every year with our audit, which they've just gone through that book of processes we have. But you will change the processes to match the software,
Makes sense.
so, cause it's too expensive to change the software to match the processes.
Yeah, makes sense. But I assume that, that being said, that these companies go through vetting of processes to make sure that they try and make it as efficient as possible.
One of the things that Kyle said is that you look at each department, over time, they start this way, cause we have it written policy, people change. It's still getting to finance, but they're each doing it a little differently, and so that's, part of this is to say, well, what is the best, look at how everybody's doing it, what is the absolute best way to do it for that moment, or, I shouldn't say absolute, what is the best one that's reasonable to get to? Cause
No, and the department can't change anything without making the whole system break, because the
Yeah,
department,
that makes sense.
it has to go to everyone.
No, it's good. No, I just amend my comments there, just to make sure everybody knows that was no slight on staff at all. It was just generally people as you work, come up with different things, and this is my way of doing it, and you get settled into some of those kinds of things, so it's always good to sometimes have fresh set of eyes to say, this really will help speed things up for you.
And one thing I do wanna add is, there's a dichotomy occurring with the software vendors. I attended a week-long system readiness and ERP system selection class. And it was to, it actually was. Luckily, it was only a half a day for those 5 days, it wasn't a whole day, or I probably would have. But what they said is the vendors are kind of breaking out into two groups. One group is, they will bring in consultants that will actually look at your business processes with you and say, okay, this is the way the system works, this is the best way to do it. Those are typically the very large vendors, so that's your PeopleSofts, your SAPs, your Oracles do that. The more smaller to mid-sized companies, they will bring trainers out, they will tell you what the software can do, what your options are, but you as the client have to decide how to implement it, so they're not going to make suggestions, they'll say, these are your options, pick one. With that being said, most of the systems now, they generally operate in the same way. Like accounts payable, they're all going to have electronic approvals, they're all going to have document management. So that's also why they say to start with business process improvement, because if you have an idea of what one software can do, they all will most likely do the same thing. And of course, you'll tweak that as you go through implementation, but. So the next thing is defining the scope for the software. So this is essentially the list of what the software needs to do, further broken down by the deal breakers that it absolutely has to do this, the half would be nice, and the more of a wish. And the next step, which is one of the hardest, is creating and actually issuing the RFP based on that scope. So issuing an RFP, telling software vendors this is what we want our software to do. They will respond with what their software can do and how much of the scope they can match. So once we receive those back, we would shortlist the vendors. We would pick 2 to 3 probably shortlist vendors for demos. So typically they will come on site. What I've seen in the past is we would create a script of what we would want to see the software do. A lot of times they will also have, the vendors will have a prepackaged demo that they will go through. It gives you a chance to interact with the vendors, ask them questions, give them business processes to look at, et cetera, et cetera. So from there, you would select the vendor and then enter or finalize contract negotiations. With the SaaS, that would also include what's called a level of service agreement. So it would bind the vendor to a certain level of service, saying your system's going to be up 99.998% of the time or some number. What the remedies would be if they don't meet that, sometimes it's financial. It also gives them a chance to guarantee what sort of backups that they have or how they protect the data and that type of thing. So that contract negotiations and then that level of service agreement, that can take months to work through and get an agreeable contract in place. So after that, the real work begins, having the city and the vendor work on actually implementing the software, and it's typically done in phases.
How long is the process typically?
We will get to it, but from start, like if we were to start today to implementing the final module, which I propose to be utility billing, will be 4 years. It's not a quick process. So year one is that process improvement I talked about, defining scope, issuing the RFP, evaluating, and selecting the ERP. That typically will take about a year. Year two would be implementing the core financials, so that's the general ledger. They typically like cashiering implemented at that time also. Next phase would be HR and payroll. And then finally would be utility billing. Of note here, because this is different than what I was taught with the last implementation I did, they're actually recommending doing a separate RFP for utility billing because they say you can eliminate a lot of really good software because they don't offer financials or HR. And utility billing is definitely the hardest of the conversions because of the amount of data involved, and you're also impacting customers, so I think we also, not that we don't put care in the other modules, but that's the one, I mean, we quadruple check things before we send bills out, cause we don't want our customers getting incorrect bills or causing panic.
There's probably new software on their end where they have to re-log in, re-put their information in, redo, set up their auto pays, all that.
Possibly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, some of that will come over. I've done this twice now. And sometimes the vendors will tell you they can do it faster.
They always will.
That's still the timeline, no matter what they tell
They're
you,
good salespeople.
it's still this time.
Well, and sometimes you can, depending on your staff and staff availability, you can overlap some of these. So for example, the last implementation I did, we overlapped HR and payroll and utility billing because HR payroll had enough knowledge of systems and they had enough time to implement it that me as a project manager, I didn't have to spend my time with HR payroll, I could spend it with utility billing.
Well, our police implemented like a lot of things really fast, so. Like animal services, boom,
Yeah.
right?
Some of it's the vendor's capacity.
IT that said
You
that.
got finance now?
That
No,
was
I don't
IT
do
that
numbers.
said
See,
that.
so we know we have a good IT department.
How's the user interface on it? Like, from the non-financial
Yeah.
aspect of it, like our HR, payroll, or our utility service people?
So to give you an idea, there's about 5 to 7 vendors in our size frame. I've seen demos for 3, I've worked with 1. The one has improved a lot since I implemented it, but they have screens that are intended for non-accountants. So like a department head can go in, it's first web-based, so they're not having to log into a program, and it's smartphone enabled. So it's designed for a smartphone, but they'll see their accounts, they'll have charts and graphs showing where they're at, they can drill down for more information. So it is overall much better. HR, the one I'm thinking of is leaps and bounds better because it really hides all of the payroll detail and just gives the data that they need to do their job, so much better.
And a lot of them have different dashboards, they can,
Right.
each person can customize their own information. Yeah.
So with that, I did want to identify just some challenges that I've seen as I've kind of worked through this. This is probably the number one is going to be staffing, just because finance, HR, and utility billing all run with a very lean staff. So having that time to dedicate to the system implementation, to be honest with you, is going to be a challenge. And finance actually only has 1 salaried employee, which is me, so that's good and bad. A lot of times the salaried employees kind of take the brunt of the implementation, and then utility billing is 1 person plus customer service, so.
Is it because it's sensitive information, or is this something you can hire temporary help to just do data entry that gets it implemented?
Yeah, so it's that, and then also I think we have a lot of talent within the city, so it would be talking with the department heads and seeing what resources they have available to help, because we have a lot of talented people that could help, so.
One of the things I've seen is you're still operating. So these people are doing a day-to-day
Their 9 to
job.
5
This is
job.
trying to come in,
Do extra.
they're trying to learn their processes at the same time they're still doing their job. And that's why it bogs down a little bit when you're small.
Early lane, yeah.
And some of the implementation can also be, the work can be alleviated by looking at, especially data conversion, because that is really what takes a lot of time, is proofing that data, making sure it's accurate. Finding errors when they create their cross path programs to do it. So the less data we import, the actual easier it is. So we also look at things like that to alleviate the amount of time staff's having to spend on the conversion.
Do we currently have job postings out for these areas, or is that something we're looking at?
So we have actually added to the finance and the HR staff since it started. So we have
Okay.
additional, although we're losing Alan and all of his expertise, but we've got we brought in some additional people. So yeah, there's still small staffs for this. These implementations are just, like I said, they're hard because you're still doing your day-to-day job and you're trying to get up to speed.
It's relatively short-term period.
It is, this is I liken it to a root canal. Nobody likes it, but when you get through it, it feels a lot better. But it's getting to that point, cause there's also this training. It's also the one way to make sure that your last software was perfect is to do a change, cause then everybody realizes how the other one did it and they really liked it, but now they're learning a new one.
Polaris will be the best thing ever made if we were to implement a new software.
It's just the way it is.
For a while.
Yeah. One thing I
Then they'll get
do,
up to speed.
one thing I also wanna mention on staffing, cause I think this is a misconception. A lot of people think this is a software implementation, it's an IT project. It really is not an IT project, it is a finance, HR, utility billing project. We will of course need IT's help with certain things, but IT does not have, finance is not their core business function, they don't understand the ins and outs of it. So it really is finance, HR, payroll, UB implementation. Another big one is funding. This number is actually wrong. The 3,100 is actually a quarter, so we're paying a little over 12,000 a year for Polaris, which is a great value for what we get. I used a competitor of Polaris at the last city I worked at. We paid double that. You know, just to give you an idea. I mean, we are getting a value with Polaris. These software numbers are from an RFI I did 2 years ago at the last city I worked at with a consultant. So a new software is going to be around 400,000, and then of course our annual support costs are going to go up to between 40 and 60,000. It'll of course depend on if we go the software as a service route, if the vendor will even offer that. There are some vendors that won't, or if we house it in-house. With a SaaS, that one-time cost up front actually goes down, but they make it up by charging more in annual support. And of course, we don't have this currently in our budget.
Would we outgrow the program? Like say we bought one that you're familiar with, could we outgrow that as our size of the city? Or
We would look, so what I would do is look for a product that will actually support us at build out. The one I've used would support us till build out.
There's kind of certain
Small, medium, large.
Yeah.
jumps, and Harriman just blew past theirs like really quickly. But we're in the larger groups. We're probably not in the, we're the largest groups, but we're in,
Yeah, we're not at the PeopleSoft Oracle stage, but we're not at the Cassell Polaris stage. We're kind of in that middle area.
It seems like there's some cost savings here too, though, because if I just listen to all the redundancy and some of the things that you just talked about, that these people are having to do this and this and this.
Time management,
Yeah,
for sure.
time management, those types of things are gonna free up some of that type of stuff, which increases productivity, which is cost savings. I would assume that we're gonna gain a lot of that.
You're correct. We won't be able to not have employees, but we might be able to delay hiring additional employees because we'll have some
So they
efficiencies.
say,
Like,
look at that, just alone, annual support, that's one
One employee.
full-time employee, if the process is
But
say
it
a
also-
future hire,
Yeah.
not a future employee, I think we need, like, current employee, it's not,
Yeah,
but a future hire that we would have had.
as you continue to grow, you're gonna have to,
It also keeps the desk the paperwork off the desk and then the computer getting signatures and processing, it's the speed and time.
You don't
Heaven
have to
forbid
find-
something falls behind the desk and counter and a year later, we forgot to pay so-and-so, right?
You don't have to.
They don't
find-
let you
find them
forget.
out.
Yeah.
Forget
We- This, not that I wanna admit this in a public meeting, but we did spend 20 minutes today looking for an invoice. We did find it, however.
But it happens,
Yeah.
for sure.
And of course, managing expectations, whatever system we pick is not going to do everything, and there's going to be things that it does very well. There's gonna be things that maybe it doesn't do so well, but
See, they're a little bit like Swiss Army knives. They'll do a lot of things, but they're not, they're not great.
and that's also another reason why the recommendation would be not to lump utility billing into the main RFP is because as the ERP system grows, it becomes less best in class and more of it can just do it, if that makes sense. One other downgrade is if it's a software as a service, you can't wait to upgrade your software. I know I've worked with IT professionals that are like, we always wanna be one or two versions behind, so we're not the ones working out the kinks. With SaaS, they dictate to you when you're going to be upgrading, the upgrade happens that day, you have to be ready to test and work through the issues.
It's like your phone update, and you're like, where did this go?
And I think the thing most employees, especially in finance, will notice is I can't mince words, we'll be getting a downgrade in support, so we won't be able to call an 801 number down in Orem and get immediate support, so that is what it is.
Polaris doesn't offer something that would meet our size.
No, they're pretty set on their,
They've got their niche.
yeah, they've got their, that's the perfect word, they've got their niche. From what I've heard, they've got plenty of clients, they're probably overburdened right now with just the number of clients they have to begin with. So benefits, the ability to create a paperless office, at least in finance, this was my favorite thing. With the last ERP I worked with, is I didn't have the cabinets and cabinets of paper, I was able to easily access files, it was,
What's our legal recourse on, like, how, you have to keep the records for so many years, they can be digital or on the cloud, they don't have to be, okay.
we do keep track of our records and we work with the recorder's office when we're ready to destroy them, so we are keeping a record of
I didn't
that.
know if they had to be physical.
Improved information sharing, so being able to have the same data between, engineering is the one I focus on, because we work with them a lot on development agreements and reimbursement agreements. Engineering and other departments, great.
Yeah, that's such a big deal. I think over the last few years, it's just been created so much heartburn because this will be in this location and this department didn't know about it, it just eliminates that kind of stuff.
Increased transparency between departments, my favorite example on this is during the budget process, having the departments be able to see, yes, we received your budget submission, actually being able to see, no, this is what administration's not recommending you fund, showing this is what council's showing to fund, so you have that flow of data and the departments will always know, okay, this is how I ended up from my submission to what was actually passed by the council. Less duplicate data entry. One of the things I've learned is there's a number of departments, I won't call them out, that actually have shadow systems within their department, so they have a separate spreadsheet or a separate ledger of all the transactions that they have charged to their departments. So I would love to get rid of these and figure out what that shadow system's accomplishing that the ERP system isn't, to make, it's part of that business process improvement. To see why they're using that and if there's anything we can do to alleviate that. And to answer that question, the software will have the backbone to carry us out till it build out. A good rule of thumb is every 10 years you look at your software and evaluate if it's meeting your needs or not. So I can't guarantee we will use, if we do move to a new software, we'll use it for 50 years. But it should have the capacity to. And then more intuitive user face. And then increased collaboration, which goes with information sharing. So just some things I'd like to get some feedback on, if this is something the mayor and council are supportive of. If you have any major concerns or anything I might need to gather more information on and bring you an update on. Cause we'll have at least a year before I'll be back saying this is the program we would like to go with.
So I'm certainly supportive of it, anything that would improve efficiencies and I think we do a good job to some point, and then you just have to bite the bullet and move up to the next level, and unfortunately it usually costs money. But if it would get us across the finish line on build out, then it makes sense to me. Obviously, I think that, I'm sure that you'll be doing this, but gather a lot of staff input as far as, that this would be really beneficial for our department if these things have this types of things in them. And then, the major concern is always money, but,
We
but,
would need to build this into the CIP and then also,
Is this
Build
a
it.
year one cost of 400,000?
yes.
That's if you.
It's a one-time.
Right,
just
but I'm
not-
just saying, so
Then you pay an annual fee.
it's not,
Yeah.
it's not when they're finished implementing, it's year one when we start the implementation.
So typically they'll require a certain percentage when you sign the contract and then they'll do progress billings. It depends on how the contract is structured. So
Okay.
typically you do have to pay an amount up front when you sign the
Is
contract.
there a chance to spread that 400,000 over, say, 2 years?
Yes.
3 years?
Potentially, depending,
Yeah.
yeah.
well,
That's
Cause a lot of times, a lot of the cost in that 400,000 is training and having consultants come out, so they will typically bill you after they have been on site. So it does spread some of that cost out.
Milestones or whatever.
Yeah.
but the first year there really wouldn't be any cost, cause you're going through the RFP process. and
Right.
that
Right, cause
first,
it'll
right?
take me a year just to get through that process.
Our next budget session, we probably budget or allocate stuff towards this.
And if
That's what
it's
we would be
SaaS,
doing.
it sounds like it's gonna be less impact up front, just
Yeah.
longer amount of time. Okay.
I'll ask of staff, is staff supportive of this direction?
We are,
And it's a needed tool, we gotta find the right one, right?
right.
I would love to see like our directors or managers, like, point out some major pain points in their departments and make sure the software is capable of that. I'm
So
sure
that's
there's-
also part of that process improvement, cause I will actually, or myself and finance will sit down with each department and go through the software. We have an idea, we probably know about 40-50% of
Yeah.
how they're using the software, but we don't know that other 50%.
What they love, what they hate,
Yeah.
what they,
Thanks.
Well, some of it's identifying what they don't know how to use, what can they find, what could they use if they knew how to do it, and do we find something that's easy? Cause it's the accountant versus not, the people who use Polaris every day, it actually does a lot. Those who don't, I think it mystifies them.
So it's just not user friendly to non.
It is, it's not bad, but
Small.
it is fairly easy to use.
Just limiting.
But at the same time, it's designed for an accountant.
Yeah. How to use it.
Yeah, I think this is a great road to go down. Hard one, but a good one, it's one needed.
If you don't see me in my office, I'm probably crying under my desk. That only happened once.
Well, you and Nathan have both been through a couple of these.
Yeah, we-
Got the right-
We went to print utility bills, everything looked like it was going great, and it just went kaput. And we were on the phone with our Canadian vendor till 2 a.m.
Oh my gosh, that's fun.
But that was the worst, that's the worst out of the implementations I've done, so. not
Yeah,
too
I
bad.
like the idea of keeping utility billing separate, cause that has always been the hardest one to
It's-
do, and in the ones I've purchased, it's been okay, but they really were just a general ledger company who's added these on, or maybe they were a court company who went out and bought these other things, and you implement, and then you realize it's not truly integrated, and it doesn't do everything you want, but if you could actually do that, cause utility billing is the one.
Yeah, the last ERP implementation I did, we included utility billing with financials and HR, and that definitely was the weakest module. So,
Good to know
Okay.
that.
great, thank you.
Appreciate it, Kyle, thank
Yep.
you. And we're sorry.
Don't cry.
Okay,
He's toughened up, it's looking his skin, he's good now.
So,
No, I'm
so we're gonna do close.
okay, I'll look for motion, we will go to closed, I'll take a quick break and then come back to closed with us, so quick for motion.
do we wanna take the break before we make the motion to close, or how's that work? Or add that in the break?
I just need a restroom.
Motion to temporarily recess the city council meeting, meeting in closed session for the purpose to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property as provided by Utah Code Annotated Code.
Second.
Sherry, second by Teddy, Teddy,
Yes.
Sherry.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. Okay, we'll go to closed and then we'll meet in general at 7.
Take it. 5 minutes.